The biggest thing that I notice where their marketing falls short is what happens after the opt-in. I give them my information in order to get the report, in order to get the lead magnet, and they text it to me. So I have a link that goes straight to the PDF. They take me to the page immediately afterwards where I can download the PDF. And then actually not much happens. When I've done this in the past, I've gotten a handful of calls or personal emails from people who are advisors with Fisher Investments who are reaching out to me to try and get me to schedule an appointment or to have a conversation. They're pretty easy to ignore. They're pretty easy to not respond to. I could potentially get into their sales process, which is what I know would be happening if I were to engage with them there. But if I ignore them, really, actually nothing happens after that. Nothing. Welcome to Daily Discovery Calls for Financial Advisors, the first and only show dedicated exclusively to helping entrepreneurial, growth-driven financial advisors book more discovery calls with qualified prospects every day of the week. I'm your host, Roy Furr, the Advisor CMO. Let's get into it. And you're back for the next episode of Daily Discovery Calls for Financial Advisors. I'm Roy Furr. I'm the Advisor CMO. Today, we're going to be talking about if I took over Fisher Investments lead generation today, here's what I do. So this is your opportunity to get a feel for my thinking, how I would approach something that's working now, right? A marketing program that's working now, that's generated a certain amount of results up to this point, but also that could work even better. How I look into the marketing systems that are at play and how I look for ways to optimize and improve the results, always with the goal of, well, it says it on the 10, achieving more discovery calls, daily discovery calls for financial advisors. The reality is Fisher Investments has the opportunity for many discovery calls per day across all their advisors in all their locations. All right, so in this episode, I have to admit that I have stalked Ken Fisher for years. Me and a lot of other people in the direct response marketing world have studied Ken Fisher's advertising. Even before I was working with financial advisors, I was selling to investors. I worked in investment publishing since 2010, and I would watch what Ken Fisher was doing because when I saw his ads, I recognized, okay, that's good and it works. And then it would show up over and over again, which is a pretty good sign for an ad that the response is being tracked. If that ad is showing up over and over again, it's a pretty good sign that it is working. And so I paid attention. He's been on my radar for a long time. And when I got into more actively marketing and advertising with financial advisors, I started playing Secret Shopper. I went through the process. And even today, as I was putting together the content for this episode again, I made sure that I wasn't going to be speaking out of turn. So I went through the process again. I looked up Ken Fisher's ads. Specifically, these were on the Facebook ads library. And I clicked on one of them to get to the landing page for people who click on the ads. And I entered my information there and I went into the process again. So very familiar with how Ken Fisher's advertising works. Now, it's worth noting that now Ken Fisher is a billionaire. So I looked up his Form 80, well, not his, but Fisher Investments Form ADV. And as of the latest, it would have been summer 2025, Fisher Investments has over 360,000 clients. So they've generated a ton of leads and turned a ton of leads into clients. They have over $300 billion in AUM. And earlier this year, in early 2025, Ken Fisher closed a deal selling a $3 billion minority stake in Fisher Investments to an outside investor. So that's the billionaire bit, right? He got a $3 billion investment that officially valued Fisher Investments at $12.75 billion. I put $12.75 valuation. It's $12.75 billion valuation. So Ken Fisher became a billionaire on the back of these ads. I mean, Ken Fisher is, he built a business that's much bigger than the advertisements, but the advertisements have driven a ton of the lead generation for Fisher Investments. Now, I will say, like, if I'm on Reddit and I'm looking at CFPs who are having conversations or financial advisors who are having conversations on Reddit, Fisher gets a lot of hate. There's a lot of hate in the industry for Fisher Investments, but it is hard to argue with the results of Ken Fisher as a business builder. So in terms of lead generation, in terms of advertising and marketing of financial services, Ken Fisher knows what the heck he's doing, and the Fisher Investments team knows what the heck they're doing. And so as much as hate as there might be in the industry, and people who work at Fisher Investments will come in and defend Fisher Investments and say it's not what the reputation is. And so I'm speaking from the outside here. What I can say is, as a marketer, no matter how you run the operations of your business, and I would encourage you to run the operations of your business in the best possible way for the highest possible client service to provide them the most possible value, no matter how you run the operations of your business, well, studying Ken Fisher, studying Fisher Investments for lead generation, for advertising, will do you well if you want to be effective in lead generation and in advertising. So in this episode, I'm going to share the good, the bad, and the transformation. This is, it's a bit of a thought experiment. If I'm stepping into Fisher Investments today, what am I going to do to transform how their lead generation is translating into clients generated, into new assets brought on board into their production, and ultimately that will impact the revenue of the firm. I will say that this is on the outside looking in. So while I've followed Fisher Investments advertising for a while, I don't know exactly what it looks like on the inside. All I can do is I can look from my own experience, right? But I can tell you what I see, and I can tell you how I might do it differently. I can also appreciate what they seem to be doing right. And I will say that this is a demo of sorts of my strategic breakthroughs process. If I'm working with a new client and looking to create the biggest impact right away with that client, what I want to do is I want to dive deep into what they're doing right now in terms of marketing, in terms of advertising, their financial advisory, their RIA, and I want to identify the opportunities, not to impose my ideas from the outside, although I have good ideas that I can impose on you. What I want to do is say, what are you doing right now, and how can we improve it? How can we optimize it? And so that's what we're looking at when we're looking at the transformation here. So like I said, we're going to be covering the good, the bad, and the transformation. So let's start with the good. What Fisher Investments lead generation does best. Fisher Investments is a lead generation powerhouse, right? They have this great clarity about who their clients are. And for the longest time, they would put that as the opening of their ads. Now, they still always put it in the ads. It's just not always the opening now. They would say for investors with a $500,000 portfolio. Now it's for investors with $1 million portfolio. But they are very clear about their who being investors with a portfolio of a certain size. And that is communicated clearly. And so if you see a Fisher Investments ad, am I their who or not? And if you are their who, then you're like, oh, these people are speaking to me. What do they have to say next, right? And that's a huge part of why they've been so effective with lead generation. Also, they're really good at the lead magnet strategy. Now you can call this lots of different things. It's basically giving away a free report that's designed to appeal to their who, right? Designed to appeal to their who, that gets their who to raise their hand and say, I'm interested and I'm willing to give you my contact information in exchange for this information that you're promising. That's what a lead magnet needs to do. And Fisher is great about that. In fact, you can if you look up Facebook ads library and you search for Fisher Investments and you find the right page that all the ads are linked to, you can see what all the reports are. Fisher also has a list of reports on their website, but you can see currently what reports Fisher is actually paying to put in front of people to get people to raise their hand and say, I'm interested, right? And so these lead magnet reports, they're wildly effective at getting people to raise their hand and give their contact information to Fisher Investments. They're also great at simple, effective funnels. Basically, hey, you should download this. If you're this person, you should download this report. Okay, let me enter my information, and you enter some basic information like your name, your email address, your current investments and your phone number, and you tell them whether or not you're looking for an appointment today. And that's it. Then you get the report, right? It's a simple, effective funnel that gets your contact information into their database so they can reach out to you and have the conversation. They're also pretty dang good at multi-channel marketing. I am focusing a lot in this discussion right now on what they're doing on Meta. They've also been great on Google, on other display ads online. They also are pretty good at direct mail. I have their direct mail controls from mailings that have been sent out over and over again over the years. I know that they've done other advertising, including on TV, but they've been really effective across the board at doing lead generation in different media. Most often, what I've seen is that it all goes back to this lead magnet strategy, this free report strategy. And clearly, when we look at 360,000 client households, and we look at $300 billion in assets under management, and we look at a company that's worth about $13 billion today, clearly it works well enough. So I can be critical all I want of their lead generation strategy, but I will also, in the next breath, acknowledge they're doing a lot of things right. They are doing a lot of things right. I'll just say, I feel like a lot of what they have done is they found their groove and they've stuck with it. They found their groove and they've stuck with it. So if there is a better groove, if there's a deviation from the groove that's 20% different, they haven't found it because their groove has worked well enough up until this point. Which brings me to the bad, where Fisher Investments marketing falls short. And what I would say is the biggest thing that I notice where their marketing falls short is what happens after the opt-in. I give them my information in order to get the report, in order to get the lead magnet, and they text it to me. So I have a link that goes straight to the PDF. They take me to the page immediately afterwards where I can download the PDF. And then actually not much happens. When I've done this in the past, I've gotten a handful of calls or personal emails from people who are, advisors with Fisher Investments who are reaching out to me to try and get me to schedule an appointment or to have a conversation. They're pretty easy to ignore. They're pretty easy to not respond to. I could potentially get into their sales process, which is what I know would be happening if I were to engage with them there. But if I ignore them, really, actually nothing happens after that. Nothing. I've requested these reports multiple times from Fisher Investments, and I look back in my email inbox and I search specifically for emails from Fisher Investments. And it's not because I'm deleting them. I archive most of my emails. If I search for emails from Fisher Investments, there is nothing. I've gotten attempts to reach me by phone. I've gotten text messages. I've gotten a handful of emails from individual advisors, but there is no systematic marketing approach after that lead generation to actually get me to re-engage with anything that they're doing, much less reach back out to them another time. And so that's going to bring us to the transformation where we're going to spend most of our time during this episode. I'm going to share what I do differently at Fisher Investments. And let's start with what I wouldn't do right away. So you might think that as somebody, as a marketing guy, as an advertising guy coming in, my first thing that I would do is find new channels to put the advertising in, to increase the advertising spend. If they have stuff that's working, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go chase down different ways that I can spend more money, especially if I get a media buyer's commission based on how much money they're spending on marketing and advertising. And yeah, I'd love to be able to do that. But I don't actually, I wouldn't do that because I would much rather fix what's happening after the opt-in first to make every person who requests one of those reports have a higher average value per opt-in than go out and spend a bunch more money. Because once we have that higher average value per opt-in, once more of those people are becoming clients, then we can go back and we have a much bigger budget to spend aggressively on pursuing other media channels. So I wouldn't do any big lead generation experimentation. I wouldn't do anything like that to chase new audiences, new cold audiences, what I would do is the first thing that I would focus on, the biggest levers that I would pull, right, would be lead nurturing and conversion. Lead nurturing and conversion. And so I want to start here. I've got notes in a few different areas. The first place that I would start is this area from report request to a scheduled call. Now, I am not a fan of chase-based follow-up, and everything that Fisher Investments does is chase-based follow-up, which means those people at Fisher Investments who are getting those leads are chasing you as the prospect down. And the positioning there is honestly terrible. A really good advisor is someone you go to, not someone who comes after you. The person who is chasing is the salesperson. If you think about like relationship dynamics and all of that, the person who is chased is perceived as more needy than the person who is chasing, the person who's being chased. The person who is chasing is perceived as lower value than the person being chased. And I don't want that. Like what I want, I don't want that desperation for the advisors. I would much rather have the advisors being positioned as someone who is worth pursuing, as someone whose time is immensely valuable, as someone who's not going to chase you down because their time is too valuable for that, and find a way to make it so we are driving more inbound appointment scheduling with the advisors and less outbound chasing. And so for each of the reports, I would do what I've called a desirable discovery call offer. For each of the reports that Fisher Investments puts out, I would find a way. So if it's about income, I would find a way to create a discovery call offer that's about unique income sources in retirement or analyzing their retirement income plan. If it's about Social Security, I would find a way to talk about Social Security. If it's about taxes, I would find a way. I would find a different way to position that first call that they're going to have with a member of the Fisher Investments team based on the content of the report. And so I would come up with creative, compelling offers, and I might test different positioning, different names for the different offers because they're running a lot of traffic. So there's a lot of opportunity to test here. But I would create offers that is something that when somebody sees it, they're like, yeah, I want to have that conversation with a member of the Fisher team because if I requested this report about this topic and they're able to provide me even more personalized guidance around this topic, like that's going to be compelling. And so I would come up with those offers that people are actually going to want to book. And then I would build it into the content of the report and I would build it into the campaign around the report. And we'll talk about that, but this is basically everything that happens afterwards. I wouldn't start pitching that discovery call offer before the person requests a report. What I'm talking about is what happens after. Right now, there's almost nothing. So me calling it a campaign, feels like nothing, right? But we'll be talking about what comes after the report, what comes after the report request. And I would find a way to build this desirable discovery call offer into that campaign, into the content, so that people specifically are, instead of being chased by Fisher Investments representatives, they are actually saying, yeah, I want to speak to somebody. I want to talk to somebody. And they're given an opportunity to reach out and explicitly request this. And it would start on the thank you page. So my note here is transforming the thank you page. Right now you get to the thank you page. It offers the download. There's a couple other things on there. But it is not, the thank you page is really primarily about offering the download. And I would still do that. I would still offer the download. One of the first things that I would do in addition to offering that download is I would add a video summary above the fold at the top of the page where when somebody loads it, they see the report, they see the download button, but they also see a video that they can click play on. And it would be a well-positioned video summary of the report. It would essentially cover many of the same topics that are in the report in a way where people who are maybe more likely to engage in different media, more likely to engage with video, would be able to just sit back and absorb the content. So different people are going to engage with different media in different ways. And I'm looking for ways to get people to engage in as many media formats as possible. So I'd add that video summary that covers a lot of the same content that's based on the same hook of the report, but that also puts a face to Fisher Investments. So I would find a person that is a good representative of Fisher Investments and actually have them on camera. Maybe not the whole thing is video on is like a profile on camera. Some of it may be slides. It may be different type of content that doesn't require the person's face on camera, but I would put a face and a voice to Fisher Investments. It doesn't necessarily have to be Ken in a company of their size, but I do want it to be human, and I want it to feel human, and I want it to feel like a connection. Now, what I would not do is what they have on their page right now, which is what to expect next, will call you. I wouldn't want to basically promise that I'm going to sick a salesperson on them because they gave me their information for the report. What I would do is I would offer a clear next step, which is that desirable discovery call. So the report itself, there would be the report, the download button, the video. All of that would kind of direct people towards your next step. Book this, whatever it is, strategy session with a member of the Fisher Investments team. And it would very specifically give someone a scheduling process that they could follow that would connect them with a member of the Fisher Investments team to start the conversation. So instead of Fisher chasing the prospect would instead be going into the Fisher Investments professional process for how to onboard new clients, new leads. And that person would be choosing to make that step forward. And there is a positioning power in this, that we're switching from the chase game to expert positioning. An expert has a process. An expert is someone you go to. An expert is someone whose time you have to carve out on their schedule, and you have to have the privilege of being able to do that. Well, we'd be doing that here in this process, implicitly, not necessarily explicitly, but on the thank you page, it would be all about, hey, you've done the right thing by requesting this content. Here's a couple ways that you can consume it. Now, the next step is to get that personalized guidance, and you do that by scheduling this call. And there can be some different ways that you approach that, but the mechanism of this process is that they get the content. Now, the next step that they need to follow is to schedule the call. And right there, you would suddenly have for Fisher, for somebody who spends so much money on marketing and advertising, you would have a ridiculous number of discovery calls scheduled just by transforming the thank you page in that way. It would make a massive difference in the number of people that Fisher is having to chase. Now, it wouldn't convert everybody, and they may still have people who are following up, and we're going to talk about different ways to follow up at this point. But this would make a massive difference in the number of people who are actually getting on the phone with a member of the Fisher team shortly after requesting these reports. Then you need to think about nurturing these hot leads. These are the people right after they've requested the report. What are you going to do? Well, right now, Fisher does not even send me an email that reinforces how good of a decision it was that I requested the report, that links me back to the landing page, the thank you page for the report. So I would send an immediate email follow-up that's designed to get somebody to go back to that landing page. So they have that reference in their email inbox, and it points them back to this page where they can, 1, download the report, 2, watch the video summary. I might tease the video summary and some valuable content in there in the email itself, and 3, request that appointment with a member of the team. I would make sure that there was an immediate email follow-up that went out afterwards. I would also send a series of emails, a drip series of emails that goes out over the next few days to reinforce consumption of the content. And sometimes what you can do is you can basically just mirror the content of the report. Some of the big points, you pull them out, you make an email out of them, and you offer a clear next step from there. What this provides is an alternative consumption path of the same information. The person didn't want a PDF necessarily. They wanted the information. And so if you can provide these alternative consumption paths for the information, the download, the video, emails dripped out over a few days, all of which that point towards, hey, the next best step for you is to figure out how to personalize these strategies for your situation, then that's going to be what's going to compel people to raise their hand and to actually request that appointment. And then I would make sure that it's not advisors, or certainly not senior advisors, that are following up with people. I would have either junior advisors or appointment setters who have a role for these people who did give their information, and their role is to reach out to them and to say, hey, I just wanted to make sure that you got that report. Hey, I'm whoever from Fisher Investments. I just want to make sure that you got that report. And I was wondering if anything in there surprised you. Okay, let's start a conversation, right? And what that does is it positions these people as a helper, and it starts a conversation. If they didn't get the report, this person who is making the call can reinforce that, okay, let me help you get that report. Let me make sure that you get it now. And then the conversation starter, was there anything in there that surprised you? That's going to allow these people to it's going to allow these people to express like, oh, yeah, I haven't read the report yet, but I was interested in it because of this. Okay, well, I would encourage you to look at this part of the report. Or, yeah, I was surprised by point number 3 in there because it was kind of contrary to what I've talked to my advisor about. And so they can have that conversation, and then they can move that person from that conversation towards actually meeting with a Fisher advisor who is able to provide that kind of personalized feedback on their strategy. So I would have a specific nurture sequence in place right after someone requested the report, where what they're doing is they're getting that content drip fed to them over the next few days that just continues to put Fisher in front of them as they're in this very active part of the buying process. They specifically sought this out. They specifically requested information. They specifically raised their hand and said, I'm thinking about this right now. So during that period of time, you want to make the most of that, and you want to communicate clearly and often with them and consistently drive them towards, hey, you need to have a conversation with one of our advisors. And when you do that, a lot more of them are going to proactively seek to have that conversation with the advisors than if you're not doing that. Now, for those leads who don't immediately have a conversation with an advisor, the leads who are maybe non-responsive to the emails, to any kind of helpful follow-up calls, the leads who did not specifically book an appointment on the thank you page, well, you're going to want to continue to nurture them, but we're gonna move from zoomed in on the specific topic of the report to zoomed out on Fisher Investments and their process as a whole. And the reason that we're going to do this is tied to something called Google's 7-11-4 rule. Now, I've talked about this in a previous podcast episode, but basically Google did this research that said that we've, as consumers, with the growth and proliferation of the internet, we've moved from this idea of we see an ad for something we're interested in, and we move into an active buying process. We go seek out the product, the service, whatever. We start talking to someone. And now they're across consumers, most consumers go through an evaluation step between stimulus and response. And in that evaluation step, they're going to consume 7 hours of content across 11 touch points in 4 separate media channels on average. And so that can be the downloadable report, it can be the video, it can be the emails, it can be a conversation with a member of their team. Now that's 4 separate media channels, 11 touch points. We have the report, we have the video, we have the thank you page, we have the emails, we have members of the team reaching out. And the 7 hours, well, we want to continue to provide valuable content. Now, some people are going to enter this funnel from the beginning, having already been in the 7-11-4 process, of that evaluation process where they're gathering information. And so they may convert much faster. Some people are going to be much earlier on, and they're not going to convert for weeks or months or even years into the future. But we want to nurture these leads with the goal of getting them to 7 hours of engagement across at least 11 touch points across 4 separate media channels. And so part of what we're going to do is, after that nurture sequence for the brand new leads, we start to talk about Fisher Investments. We do educational marketing to differentiate Fisher, to say what it is that we provide, how our process works, how it's different, how it's made to benefit you, who we are, where we came from, where we're going, our perspective on the world. And we're looking to establish expert positioning on financial planning, right? And we can fill in your advisory firm, your RIA for Fisher Investments here. I'm just talking about what I do differently at Fisher Investments, right? But we're looking in this, we went from zoomed in on the specific content of the report to zoomed out for who is Fisher Investments and why would they be beneficial for me to work with. And we're going to also, again, I was talking about the desirable discovery calls. We're going to put soft next step calls to action throughout. Basically, everything that we put out is going to offer someone a next step if they're interested in moving forward. And this may not be as specific to the content of the report. It may be more general towards Fisher Investments, towards financial planning, doing some kind of financial planning, financial analysis, retirement planning analysis, something like that, right? But we're going to be continuously providing more valuable content for them. It's aimed at providing value while also distinguishing Fisher Investments. And that gives someone a next step. If they say, okay, I've got my 7 hours on average, I've got my 11 touch points on average, I've got my 4 separate media channels on average, and I'm ready to move forward, then we're going to give them a specific way to do that in every single piece of marketing that we put out. And then we're still going to have a significant number of those people who actually don't respond, who never raise their hand, who never schedule anything, who never are responsive to any kind of follow-up communication that may go out individually as well. We're going to have some that don't, we're going to have a lot that don't respond. So we're going to do something that, frankly, I am blown away that Fisher Investments doesn't do this at this point, or that I haven't been exposed to if Fisher Investments is doing it. We're going to nurture our cold leads. We're calling them a cold lead at this point. We're going to move from these welcome sequences about the report and then about Fisher Investments to database marketing. And so we're going to be continuously communicating with these leads about anything relevant to what Fisher does. And it's going to be typically more current events focused, more topical to what's going on right now, maybe more towards general financial best practices and planning principles and investing principles, and more towards some of the topics that are going to get people to raise their hand again. And here, what our goal of doing all of this database marketing is really just to get them to raise their hand again, to get them into one of these funnels again, to get them into one of these sequences again, so that they go from being a cold lead back to being a hot lead, right? Because someone may request one report and then they may go cold for months, and then they may request another report from the database marketing, and they may go cold for months, and they may request a third report. And by the time they get to the third report, that's when they're finally like, you know what, I got to get a hold of Fisher. Maybe something changed in their life. Maybe something changed in the markets. Maybe something changed somewhere else, right? But that's the point, whatever it is, where they say, okay, now it's time for me to reach out. Now it's time for me to book the appointment. Now it's time for me to have this conversation. And so the goal is to get them to raise their hand again and raise their hand again and raise their hand again. And so, for example, I mean, because Fisher is consistently putting out so many of these different lead magnets, they could consistently be announcing these lead magnets to their database. It's really simple, right? They do these lead magnet campaigns to their database. Fisher Investments puts up YouTube videos. Ken Fisher gets on and says, it's now a good time to invest in stocks, right? He could, the database marketing team could use those as like, hey, we have this new message from Ken about is now a good time to invest in stocks based on what's going on in the world right now. Go and watch this video right now. There could be any kind of alternative database marketing campaign. So things like a webinar campaign, things like a video sales letter campaign, things like just whatever it is. All we're trying to do is we're getting people to raise their hand again through consistent communication to our database of past prospects. And we're going to continue doing that basically until they opt out, until they say, please don't send me any more information about Fisher Investments, or until they become a client, right? And we're going to just have a systematic, consistent process for nurturing and converting these leads. And if I was at Fisher Investments, going back, zooming out a little bit, I would focus on this, because what this is going to immediately do, regardless of any new volume of leads that we could bring in the door, that we could bring in the front door, I'd be making every single lead that we're bringing in the door today far more valuable, far more likely to convert into a client, far more likely to lead to production for the firm. And it's going to be wildly effective at growing the firm just because right now they're wasting a ton of money on all these leads that they're generating that get almost no follow-up. And I really don't get it. I saw a stat recently that the average lifetime value of a client for a financial advisor is often in the $100,000 to $200,000 range. And so every lead that they're letting slip through the cracks by not having this effective nurturing and follow-up in place is another $100,000, $200,000 out the door that they're not getting as a result of just basically failed database marketing, failed nurturing of their past prospects. So wrapping up this episode, those are my thoughts. Maybe you have different thoughts about what you would do differently, but those are my thoughts. If you want more content like this, don't forget to subscribe here. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm at Roy Furr, or you can search for The Advisor CMO. That's at ROYFURR, or The Advisor CMO. And if you want to learn more about my strategic breakthroughs process, where you can go through all the free content you want, my videos, my podcast, whatever, my daily memos, email, you can go through all the free content you want. But what really matters is how all of these strategies get personalized to you. And that's what my strategic breakthroughs process is about. That's at theadvisorcmo.com/strategy. Again, theadvisorcmo.com/strategy, where I take this and I take the same thinking and I look at your marketing, your advertising, your lead attraction, nurture, and conversion process. And I say, if I were in your shoes, what would I do to get you better results tomorrow? And I give you a specific marketing plan based on that. This is really just a sliver of what I might do for Fisher Investments, but it gives you a good sense of that. And if you'd like the same for your financial advisor, your RIA, that's theadvisorcmo.com/strategy. I'm Roy Furr. I'm the Advisor CMO. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Daily Discovery Calls for Financial Advisors. And I will see you again in the next episode. See you soon. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Daily Discovery Calls for Financial Advisors. If you got value from this episode, I'd absolutely love it if you do me the favor of sharing it with one other person who you think would also find it valuable. It's how the show can grow and how I can keep bringing this value to you. And if you want to learn more about how you can book more discovery calls with your ideal clients, go to theadvisorcmo.com/podcast.